Theories of Creation, Talk 13. This talk discusses the advantages and disadvantages of the theory of creation being revealed over 6 days. First, the advantages. This interpretation gives explanations for several features of Genesis 1:1 to 2:4, including the phrase "God said" at the beginning of each day. And the evenings and the mornings are seen to be for man's rest, not for God to rest. And the 7th day on which God ceased was for man's sake, not for God's sake. And God gave names to things because he was talking to Adam. And secondly, there's no problem in understanding light being mentioned on day 1, 3 days before the sun, moon and stars are mentioned. And thirdly, the length of the days can be accepted as being natural days and don't have to be reinterpreted as being long geological periods. And fourthly, it explains why there are 2 creation narratives. Each was a part of 2 separate series of tablets, the first possibly written by God and the second by Adam. And fifthly, this interpretation is independent of any particular scientific view, and therefore it takes science out of Genesis. Although both P.J. Wiseman himself and also Bernard Ram, who also accepted this interpretation, both believed in the great age of the earth, it's not difficult to see that holding this interpretation of Genesis does not preclude belief in a young earth. It explains some of the features of the creation narrative more satisfactorily than the creationist interpretation, while at the same time still allowing belief in a young earth and all the other views associated with the young earth theory. This is because the age of the earth and of creation as a whole is irrelevant to this interpretation of Genesis 1. But what are the disadvantages of this theory of creation revealed in 6 days? Well, firstly, if the 6 days refers to 6 days' instruction of Adam, and on the 6th day the female, that is Eve, is referred to, then it means God instructed Adam after he created Eve. However, before Eve was created, a number of events had already occurred. Adam had been placed in the Garden of Eden. He had been told how to tend it. He'd named all the animals brought to him. And God had seen that no suitable helper was found for Adam. Genesis 2, verse 20. Although creationists believe that all this happened within a few hours on the 6th day, Wiseman says, it seems obvious that after the creation of man, several events which occupied much time happened before the woman was created. If it's assumed these events took several weeks or several months or even a year or 2, then it also means the 6 days' instruction of Adam by God took place after this period of time. However, on the 6th day of instruction, God told Adam what food he had made for him, and that he was to rule over the fish and the birds and the animals. This instruction would appear to be unnecessary if it was given to Adam after he had already lived for a while. There seems to be 2 possible answers to this problem. Firstly, the time between the creation of Adam and Eve was only a few hours, as creationists believe, and so they were instructed together. Or secondly, the account we have in Genesis 1:1 to 2:4 is a written summary of the oral instructions God had already given to Adam over the time he was alone in the garden. Maybe the creation of Eve was the event which triggered the necessity for recording God's instructions for the first time. After all, only after the creation of Eve was it possible for Adam to be fruitful and increase in number, Genesis 1, verse 28. A written account of the instructions given to Adam by God could then be passed on to subsequent generations. There is a precedent set for this idea in that when God spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai, at first he gave the 10 Commandments orally to pass on to the Israelites. It was only later that God himself wrote these on 2 tablets of stone with his own hand in Exodus 32, verse 16. The explanation of God ceasing on the 7th day because Adam needed to rest appears a little weak, although more plausible than God needing to rest. It was not until after Adam sinned that he needed to work. By the sweat of your brow you will eat your food, Genesis 3:19, and it's doubtful he needed 1 day's rest simply because he'd been listening to God for 6 days. Also, there's little, if any, hint of 1 day's rest in 7 being observed by mankind until Genesis, when the law was given, and even then it was given by God to the people of Israel only, in order to set them apart from all other nations. Maybe it was with this future teaching of the people of Israel in mind that God decided to use the format of 6 days' instruction of Adam, followed by the setting apart of the 7th day. Thirdly, when F.F. Bruce reviewed P.J. Wiseman's book in the Evangelical Quarterly in October 1948, he commented that to translate the word asa, usually to make, as show, is not possible from the standpoint of Hebrew. However, as we've already seen, it is in fact translated as such in 3 places in Genesis. Also, as we've already seen, this was only put forward as a possibility by Wiseman. In his main argument, he translated asa as did, which is totally consistent with the previous 2 verses in Exodus 20, as we've already seen. And then fourthly, in Genesis 2 verse 3, there appears to be a problem in that it says, "And God blessed the 7th day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done." Here it says that God ceased from creating, and this is usually understood to refer to God's creation of the heavens and the earth. However, under Wiseman's scenario, this would not be so. What God ceased from was the creation of the 6 stone tablets, on which was recorded the details of his creation. To make this clear, Wiseman produced his own translation of Genesis 2 verses 1 to 4, which is a very literal translation of the original Hebrew. And at first glance, his translation appears to be a cumbersome one, until it's compared with Young's literal translation of the Bible. The two are, in fact, very similar, as can be seen in the information given below the screen. I will just read the 2 translations of Genesis 2, 1 to 4, first Wiseman's and then Young's. So Wiseman's Genesis 2, 1 to 4 says, "And were finished the heavens and the earth and all their arranged order. And on the 7th day God finished his business which he had done, and he desisted on the 7th day from all his business which he had done. And God blessed the 7th day and set it apart, for in it he ceased from all his business which God did creatively, in reference to making these the histories of the heavens and the earth, in their being created in the day when the Lord God did the earth and the heavens." And then Young's literal translation says, "And the heavens and the earth are completed and all their host. And God completed by the 7th day his work which he hath made, and ceaseth by the 7th day from all his work which he hath made. And God blesseth the 7th day and sanctifieth it, for in it he hath ceased from all his work which God had prepared for making. These are births of the heavens and of the earth, in their being prepared in the day of Jehovah, God's making earth and heavens." Now, if we set these 2 side by side and also compare them with the NIV, which was not around in Wiseman's day, we can see that they are both very similar and allow for Wiseman's argument that these verses refer to the completion of the 6 stone tablets. Lastly, how does this theory of creation revealed in 6 days fit in with science today? This interpretation of Genesis 1:1 to 2:4 is able to accommodate any of the 4 scientific views already discussed, and this is mainly because it avoids the necessity of categorically stating when creation happened and how long it took. If the beginning of Genesis merely records 6 days' revelation to Adam and to Eve, it can be left open as to whether the creation itself had just taken place or whether it had taken billions of years to complete. If Wiseman's understanding of these verses is correct, then what we believe happened scientifically is irrelevant. In the next and final talk in this series, I give a short conclusion to my discussion of these 5 different theories of creation.